On a quiet Navy base, a humble janitor pushed his cleaning cart through hallways, echoing with pride uniforms and ranks. No one looked twice at him except a little girl who held his hand and called him Daddy. One afternoon, a proud SEAL Admiral mocked him in front of the entire mess hall, laughing as he asked, "What's your call sign, janitor?" No one expected the quiet man to answer. No one imagined the truth behind his calm smile. But when he finally spoke, the entire base froze and a legend walked back into the light. Before we begin this emotional journey of honor, fatherhood, and redemption, if stories about kindness, strength, and second chances touch your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another tale like this. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. If you'd like, morning in Coronado carried a particular kind of stillness, the calm breath before steel boots hit concrete. Before ocean salt air mixed with jet fuel and discipline at Naval Base Coronado, greatness walked halls in polished shoes and pressed dress whites. Reputation meant everything here. And yet there was one man who walked these halls without rank, without ceremony, without anyone offering a salute, only glances, snickers, or worse indifference. Daniel Reed pushed a mop down the polished corridor, sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing hands that didn't match his role. These weren't hands born for janitorial work. They were shaped by storms, by wind-whipped steel ropes, by saltwater and danger and unforgiving decisions. Strong, scarred, silent, his long chestnut hair brushed his collar. His green work shirt faded and humble hung loosely over broad shoulders, earned from decades of dedication. His boots weren't regulation, just practical. Functional, quiet. He worked methodically. Mop, rinse, a mop. No wasted motion. The kind of precision only a man once trained to survive the impossible would carry into every mundane task. But no one here knew that. Or so everyone thought. A pair of young SEAL candidates walked past him, laughing. "Dude, he's here again. You'd think the Navy would get a cleaning robot by now." "Yeah." The other snorted. "Or at least someone younger. Man looks like he crawled out of a mountain cabin." Daniel kept mopping, not a muscle twitched. He'd learned long ago, when you actually know who you are, you don't need to prove it. A voice cut through the hallway, crisp and commanding. "Eyes front, move." The cadets immediately stiffened. A woman in immaculate white stepped past Admiral Elena Carter. Posture elegant and firm dark hair perfectly pinned beneath her cover. She walked with authority sharpened by years of standing between crisis and command. For just a second, her eyes flicked toward Daniel, noticing the posture, the quiet discipline, the way he moved like someone who once led men and walked battlefields instead of corridors with a mop. Something didn't fit. She looked again, puzzled. Then duty pulled her forward. Daniel kept cleaning. He reached the end of the hallway just as short footsteps thundered from behind. Daddy, a blur of blonde hair and sunshine, crashed gently into his side. Emma Reed, 8 years old, backpack-bouncing smile bright enough to warm the entire base. Daniel's face changed instantly, softening like ice thawed by spring sunlight. "There you are, sweetheart." She hugged him tight. He bent to her height, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Emma's eyes sparkled with curiosity. She always had questions, always saw more than the world expected of a child. "Can I eat with you today?" she asked, swinging her backpack playfully. "Of course," he said, voice low and warm. "I made sandwiches." She gasped dramatically. "Did you cut off the crust?" "You wound me," he joked softly. "When have I ever forgotten the crust removal protocol?" She giggled. Their laughter felt out of place in the stoic military corridor, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. As they walked toward the dining area, she chatted about school, about her drawing of a lighthouse, about how Mrs. Taylor said she had a very brave heart. Daniel listened, really listened, nodding with small, proud smiles. A father who carried his war quietly, but wore his love loudly. In the cafeteria, uniforms filled tables. Noise rolled like a tide metal utensils. Bootsteps, laughter, tension, pride. Daniel and Emma sat at a corner table near the back. A shadow life at the edges of the world unnoticed. He unpacked 2 simple lunches. Turkey sandwiches, apple slices, and small Tupperware containers. Nothing fancy, but made with devotion. Emma took a bite, cheeks puffing. "This is the best sandwich ever made in human history," Daniel chuckled. "I'll alert the Smithsonian." A few tables away, 2 young sailors watched him, whispering. "That's the janitor guy. Yeah, weird. He's always so calm. Probably used to cleaning toilets in prison." Another snicker. Daniel didn't respond. He never did. Instead, he gently placed a napkin under Emma's juice cup so it didn't drip on her shirt. That was the battle he cared about. Now keeping her world clean, safe, unscarred. Across the room, Admiral Elena Carter walked in, scanning the area as she spoke with aides. Her gaze landed on Daniel again, this time with the child beside him. It was rare to see softness on base. Rarer still to see it radiate from a man who otherwise looked carved from quiet storms. There was something in his posture, humble but rooted, someone who bowed to life by choice, not defeat. Her officers spoke, but she wasn't listening anymore. Emma suddenly waved at her cheerful innocent. Elena blinked, caught off guard, then gave a small, polite nod back. Daniel noticed, gave a subtle, acknowledging nod, respectful, neutral. Elena walked on, unsettled by the moment in a way she couldn't quite explain. A different group entered next, louder, brasher. Admiral Grant Marshall, medals gleaming proudly across his chest, flanked by junior officers trying too hard to impress. He always made an entrance. Power didn't just matter to him. It had to be displayed. His eyes landed on Daniel and amusement curled his lips. Look at this place. Best Navy base in the nation. And apparently we're hiring wilderness janitors now. More laughter. Emma looked up, confused. Daniel simply placed a gentle hand on her back. Reassurance rather than defensiveness. He didn't look at Marshall. Didn't need to. Elena, watching from across the room, exhaled subtly irritation rising in her chest. Nodded Daniel at the arrogance of a man who believed rank measured worth. Marshall continued down the cafeteria line, ego leading, entourage trailing. To him, Daniel wasn't even worth another glance. But Daniel's silence wasn't weakness. It was steel wrapped in humility. And in that cafeteria full of rank and power, no one knew that the quietest man in the room had once been the most feared call sign across oceans. No one knew that beneath the gentle father, the mop, the humble steps there slept a legend. And legends don't roar, they wait. The day would come when silence would break. But not today. Today was for crust-free sandwiches and a little girl's laughter, and for one Navy admiral who couldn't shake a feeling she had just witnessed something far more important than uniform or rank. Something real, something powerful, something almost sacred. Afternoon sunlight spilled across the base playground, stretching long shadows of swing sets and monkey bars across the concrete courtyard. Kids shouted, chased each other, clung to jungle gyms shaped like submarines and helicopters. Navy parents, most in uniform, watched from benches lined with military precision. And then there was Daniel. He stood a little apart from the rest, leaning against a tree lunchbox in one hand, posture calm as the ocean after a storm. Emma swung high legs, kicking the air-blonde hair flying behind her like a banner of joy. Her giggles rose above the noise. Pure, unfiltered youth in a place built on discipline and sacrifice. A couple of Navy moms whispered nearby, "That's the janitor's kid, right, Shame?" "She's sweet." "He looks rough." "Probably a dishonorable discharge or something." "Who stays here doing janitor work?" Otherwise, Daniel heard every word. His back didn't stiffen. His expression didn't crack. Years of training had forged him into steel. No rumor could penetrate. But something in his eyes flickered. A brief ghost of storms passed. Emma ran to him. Suddenly, cheeks flushed, breathless from play. "Daddy, guess what? I beat everyone in tag. Even the big boys." She puffed her chest proudly. Daniel knelt down to her level, brushing a leaf from her hair. "That's my girl," he murmured. Fast as the wind, a young boy approached. Uniformed Navy child, maybe 10, wearing a miniature flight jacket. "My dad said he's a commander," the boy stated boldly. "What did you do in the Navy, Mr. Reed?" "My dad said only failures end up cleaning." Silence fell like a pin drop. A couple of adults looked over, waiting to see if the quiet janitor would finally react. Emma's little fists balled at her sides, her face flushing with protective anger. "Don't talk to my daddy like that," she snapped. Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder, not to restrain her spirit, but to teach her control. "It's all right," he said calmly. Then to the boy he offered a gentle smile. "I did what I needed to do. Served where I was asked. Now I do this. And it's enough." The boy frowned, confused. Kids weren't used to humility. Not the real kind. He shuffled back toward the playground, processing the strange dignity of that answer. Emma tugged Daniel's sleeve voice, small but fierce. "Daddy, why don't they know? Why doesn't anyone know who you were?" There it was, that curious spark. Kids sensed things adults ignored. She didn't yet understand ranks or medals or call signs, but she understood her father, his quiet strength, his unfathomable depth, and she wondered, why couldn't the rest of the world see it? Daniel looked at her, those weathered eyes softening the way glaciers soften under spring thaw. "Sweetheart," he whispered, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand. "No one needs to know, but you were somebody she insisted brows knitting. You helped people. You were brave. Why hide it?" Daniel exhaled slowly, the kind of breath carved by memories some too heavy for gentle ears. "I'm still somebody," he said softly, "just not in the way they measure here." Emma's face crumpled with innocence and confusion. "But they look at you like you're nobody." "I don't like it," he tapped her nose gently. "You know the truth," he murmured. "That's enough for me. Sometimes the world sees uniforms, medals, shiny things, but I don't need anyone to clap for me. I only need you to smile like that." Her eyes glistened. She threw her arms around his neck, squeezing tight. "I always smile for you." Unbeknownst to them, Admiral Elena Carter stood a short distance away, unnoticed at first, coffee cup and hand schedule, tucked beneath her arm, duty etched into her posture. She hadn't meant to overhear, but she did. Something in her chest tightened. She watched Daniel not as an officer evaluating a subordinate, but as a woman witnessing a father choose grace over pride. There was strength and humility that medals couldn't teach, a steadiness rare in a world obsessed with rank and reputation. Her aide approached. "Ma'am, briefing in 10 minutes. Elena nodded distantly, eyes still on the father and daughter. There was something familiar in him. Not his face, but the quiet command woven into his every breath. The way he moved with control that screamed discipline, not defeat. Her aide followed her gaze. That janitor guy word is he just needed a job. Never made rank. Probably Elena lifted a hand slightly. A subtle razor-sharp gesture. That'll be all. Her aide swallowed and fell silent. Elena didn't judge by rumor. She judged by presence. And Daniel had a presence that didn't fit the label janitor. She couldn't name it yet, but it pulled at her like a tide pulling at a ship's hull. As Emma ran back to play, Elena approached quietly. Daniel straightened instinct, not deference. He nodded respectfully. "Good afternoon, Admiral," he said, voice calm, not intimidated. Most civilians stumbled in front of her. Many uniformed men did too, but not him. There was no arrogance, only steadiness. "Afternoon, Mr. Reed." Her eyes drifted briefly to Emma. "Your daughter?" "She has spirit." Daniel's lip twitched in a soft half-smile. "She gets that from her mother." Elena's chest tightened again, empathy flashing across her features. She recognized the shadow in his eyes' loss. The kind that seasons a soul makes it both sharper and kinder. "You carry yourself differently," she said, without realizing the vulnerability in her tone. "Not like most men who mop floors." He simply nodded. "Life has different seasons. This is mine." It wasn't false humility. It was acceptance. And that startled her more than any secret could. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy with unspoken truths. Neither was ready to touch. Then her radio crackled. Duty called. "I hope your season is peaceful," she said quietly, almost sincerely. He gave a small nod. "Thank you, ma'am." As she walked away, she found herself unsettled. Why should a janitor's words sit like a weight in her chest? And why did she suddenly feel that she had glimpsed a man who once stood in a very different uniform when the world bowed to? Emma ran back, breathless again. "Daddy, you didn't tell her who you were." Daniel watched Elena's retreating figure, steady voice, soft as prayer. "She didn't need to know," he whispered. "Not yet," Emma frowned. "But someone should." He put his arm around her shoulders, guiding her home. "If the truth matters," he murmured. "It finds its own way." And behind them, Admiral Elena Carter paused once more, hand resting on a railing, brows furrowed in that quiet, powerful realization. Some men don't hide. Some legends simply rest. And resting legends are not forgotten, only waiting for the right moment to rise. The next morning, the base woke early as it always did. Revel echoed across the compound. Yet the sky still held the soft, bruised blue of dawn. Steel doors slammed, boots pounded. The rhythm of military life beat strong. Daniel Reed stepped quietly through it, all pushing his supply cart down a long administrative hallway, mop buckets squeaking softly. No one saluted him, but he walked with the same posture as those who did upright, measured aware. The overhead lights flickered on, reflecting off glossy floors that bore no marks thanks to his early work every morning. He preferred this hour before the noise, before the looks. Peace had become his sanctuary, not absence of sound, but absence of judgment. But peace rarely lasts long in human places. As his cart rolled past the SEAL training wing, laughter echoed from the locker room, sharp cutting. He recognized the tone immediately. Young men unproven, desperate to assert rank where none yet existed. Guy thinks he's Navy royalty. One voice snorted. He mops floors like he's conducting an orchestra. Another voice chimed in. Maybe he got kicked out. Probably messed up big time. Or washed out of buds, someone added. Looks like the type who couldn't handle real hell week. More laughter, loud, harsh, fueled by insecurity, hidden beneath bravado. Daniel kept pushing his cart. His face was calm, but in his chest a memory pulsed quietly. Men gasping and freezing surf sand caked in every pore. Waves pounding bodies until only will remained. Hell Week wasn't where he broke. It was where he learned his endurance could break the world. He rolled past without a word. But someone inside noticed the silence. A young SEAL candidate, broad-shouldered, hair buzzed, still smelling of academy polish. His laughter stopped as he caught sight of Daniel's forearm when the janitor adjusted his sleeve. A scar curved there, deep, jagged, unmistakably born from metal and fire. Not clumsiness or bad luck. Not an accident. A battlefield kiss earned, not chosen. The candidate's expression shifted, not fully understanding, but sensing like recognizing a predator from the corner of one's eye without seeing its fangs. Daniel nodded once to him, a silent acknowledgement. Respect given, not demanded. The young candidate swallowed and turned back to his group, quieter now. For the first time, doubt crept into their little circle. Daniel continued toward the cafeteria wing where cleaning staff whispered and clattered trays. Halfway down the hall, he paused, instinct, not uncertainty. He felt eyes on him. Turning slightly, he saw Admiral Elena Carter at the far end of the corridor, clipboard in hand, speaking to an aide. Yet her gaze wasn't on the paperwork. It was on him. Not judgmental, not mocking, curious, studying, something like recognition without memory. He inclined his head in polite greeting. She returned it with a measured nod, the kind senior officers reserve for people they subconsciously respect, but don't know why yet. Before either could speak, footsteps thundered from behind. A group of SEALs off-duty, loud, confident, passed between them. One of them bumped Daniel's shoulder with just a hair more force than coincidence allowed. Careful, old-timer, the SEAL smirked. Mops can be dangerous. Wouldn't want to twist your back. Elena's eyes narrowed. Daniel simply adjusted his grip on the cart. No harm done, he said quietly. It wasn't submission. It was grace. But the young SEAL wasn't finished. Ego rarely retreats without losing something first. What did they call you in the Navy anyway, Captain Mop? More snickering behind him. Elena stepped forward. Slightly small movement, but one that carried command. Though she hadn't spoken yet, her presence sliced the air like a disciplined knife. Daniel cut her off with a calm glance. He didn't need rescue. And strangely, that made her want to intervene more. A beat passed, then a voice piped in Emma, racing around the corner, backpack bouncing. Daddy! She skidded to a stop, hugging his leg. Her innocence was armor he'd chosen over medals. The SEALs fell silent. Children do that. They make cruelty look ridiculous. Emma looked at the men and tilted. Why are you talking mean to my daddy? The hallway froze. Even steel walls seemed to pause. The SEAL's smirk faded. Shame flickered. Brief, unpolished human. We were just joking, he muttered. Emma's brow furrowed. Jokes are supposed to make people happy. Daniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Come, Pumpkin, then to the SEAL. You boys have a good day. Keep each other safe. No ego, no bite, just quiet truth. The SEAL nodded stiffly, embarrassed now. You too, sir. Sir. It slipped out by instinct because no matter his clothes, Daniel Reed carried command like gravity, unseen but undeniable. The men walked away quickly, glancing back with unsettled respect. They couldn't justify yet. Emma tugged Daniel's sleeve. Daddy, why do they laugh at you? You're the bravest person I know. Daniel knelt to her level, brushing her cheek with his thumb. People laugh when they don't understand, he murmured. And that's all right. The world isn't always kind. But we can be... Elena, still watching, felt something in her chest shift. Leadership, she'd learned, was about control, power, strategy. But this man led without title, without uniform, through character alone. Emma suddenly pointed at Daniel's forearm. They don't know about that, Daddy. Daniel gently lowered her hand. Some stories belong to the heart first. Elena's gaze followed the scar. Sharp curiosity ignited scars like that didn't come from accidents. They came from choosing to walk into fire and refusing to stay down. A quiet storm brewed behind her eyes. She stepped forward. "Mr. Reed," Daniel turned. "Admiral, where did you serve?" she asked softly. Daniel's expression was kind, but closed octador and cold stone. "Wherever they needed me," he answered. "A long time ago." Elena studied him. The steadiness, the unthreatening confidence, the humility that only comes from having once held immense power and willingly letting it go. "I see," she murmured. It wasn't an answer, but it was the truth he offered. And she could respect that. Emma tugged Daniel's hand. "Come on, Daddy, let's eat." He smiled. "Breakfast time it is." Then to Elena. "Have a good morning, ma'am?" She nodded slowly, watching father and daughter walk away. Simple, unassuming, and somehow more commanding than the gold-lined halls around them. Rumors continued swirling among the ranks that day, but for the first time, doubt threaded through the whispers. Because legends don't announce themselves, they leave little cracks in the world where truth shines through scars, silence, and the way even arrogance steps aside when greatness passes quietly by. And somewhere deep inside Admiral Elena Carter, a realization began to bloom. This wasn't a man who'd fallen. This was a man who had risen and chosen to rest. By noon, the base cafeteria buzzed with a rhythm. Only military communities understood the clang of trays, the hum of briefing chatter, the bark of sergeants herding recruits toward water stations instead of soda machines, a portrait of order and ego. Daniel Reed entered quietly, Emma skipping beside him, holding a paper lunch bag decorated with doodled stars and stick-figure dolphins. Her laughter floated above the noise, the only sound in the room, not shaped by routine or rank. Daniel carried a simple tray, 2 sandwiches, apple slices, carrot sticks, and 2 paper cups of chocolate milk. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, the kind of meal built on love, not convenience. They chose their usual spot, a corner table by the window away from the crowd. Emma swung her feet under the seat, the tips of her shoes still just shy of reaching the ground. "Daddy," she said as she unwrapped her sandwich, "did you know sea auditors hold hands when they sleep so they don't float away?" Daniel smiled, slicing her apple with a plastic knife. "That's pretty smart. Maybe we should try that next time you fall asleep during story time." Emma gasped and mocked scandal. "Daddy, I don't float away. I stick to you like glue." A warmth filled Daniel's chest. The kind of warmth battle-hardened men rarely admit they cherish. This table, this moment, this child, they were the only mission that mattered now. Everything else was noise. Across the cafeteria, officers clustered like flocks of white uniforms and polished pins. The highest among them walked with practiced confidence, boots clicking ribbons shining under fluorescent lights. Among them, Admiral Grant Marshall. He carried authority the way some carried perfume, heavy, obvious, impossible to ignore. Laughing loudly at his own joke, he slapped the back of a fellow officer as they moved toward the serving line. "Eat quick, gentlemen," he drawled. "Got a briefing in 30. God forbid anyone keeps Washington waiting." His entourage chuckled obligingly. Emma munched happily, oblivious. Daniel sipped water from a paper cup, calm, invisible. Or so everyone believed until Marshall's booming voice cut through the room. "Well, will you look at that?" he said, stopping just short of Daniel's table. The hardest working man on base, snickers, rippled behind him. A pack instinct cruel simply because it could be. Daniel lifted his eyes. Not defensive, not offended, just present. Marshall smirked, hands on his hips, chest out like a peacock smelling applause. "How's mopping duty today, son? Saving the world one spill at a time." Emma froze mid-bite. Daniel placed his hand over hers, calming without speaking. "My daughter's eating," he said, voice even. "Let's keep it respectful." A murmur rippled. Not loud, but enough. People sensed shifts even before they understood why. Marshall chuckled, waving off the quiet challenge. "Relax, Janitor. We're just having fun." He leaned closer, eyebrows raised, voice pitched just loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Tell me, son, what's your call sign?" "Mop Eagle Bucket." Boss laughter swelled cruel, careless, confident. Emma's face flushed red. "Stop it," she blurted, little hands trembling. My daddy Daniel gently touched her shoulder, a silent, "I've got this." He wiped his mouth with a napkin, movements calm as still water. Then he set the napkin down and met Marshall's stare directly. Not challenging, not yielding, just truth-meeting noise. "My call sign," Daniel said quietly. was Lone Eagle. The room stilled. It wasn't volume. It was gravity. A single phrase shifting the air, commanding silence the way storms command sailors. A fork clattered to the floor somewhere. A tray stopped mid-slide. Someone inhaled sharply. Lone Eagle. A name older than the youngest SEALs on base, whispered like myth in the corners of naval history. The operator who vanished after a rescue mission no one could replicate. The ghost commander. The one who went into hell and brought his men back alive alone. Many in the room had heard the legend. Few ever believed he was real. None imagined he mopped their floors. Admiral Elena Carter, entering through the side door, froze mid-step. Her breath caught recognition shock, all converging in a heartbeat. Marshall blinked. Confusion flickering into disbelief, disbelief into denial. What did you say? He scoffed, but his voice wavered. Daniel didn't blink. Lone Eagle. More silence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He didn't need to. Heroes shout, legends whisper. Emma tugged his sleeve, eyes wide with pride and fear, and questions she didn't yet know how to form. Daddy Daniel smiled at her soft as a lullaby. It's okay. Eat your lunch. Marshall swallowed hard, then forced a laugh, brittle as glass. Sure it was. He sneered weakly. Next you'll say you commanded SEAL Team 6. Daniel didn't reply. He didn't have to, because the first SEAL to stand up was one of the youngest, the trainee who saw the scar earlier. He rose instinctively, spine straight, boots together. Sir, the young man said quietly with respect. He's telling the truth. Whispers erupted. Shocked, breathless, disbelieving. One by one. Several SEALs stood, not certain, but compelled like soldiers sensing a general long before they know his name. Elena stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned with memory and revelation. Admiral Marshall, she said carefully, I recommend we treat Mr. Reed with proper respect. Marshall's face flushed humiliation, simmering into anger, then confusion, then fear. Power had shifted and he was the last to feel it. Daniel turned back to Emma, spreading peanut butter on her second sandwich, as though nothing had happened. You okay, sweetheart? He asked gently. She nodded, awe filling her eyes. Your Lone Eagle? She whispered, as if saying it too loud might break the world. Daniel brushed a crumb from her cheek. No, he murmured quietly. I'm your dad. That's what matters. Elena's breath hitched not from romance yet, but from reverence, from seeing a man who could stand atop the world and choose instead to kneel beside his child. On the far side of the room, a flag stirred from an open door, the American flag catching light. And in that moment, everyone who witnessed it learned a lesson. The military spends lifetimes teaching rank commands obedience, character commands allegiance. Daniel didn't need stars on his shoulders. He had honor in his silence and a daughter in his arms. And the room, the entire room, suddenly knew Lone Eagle had never fallen. He had simply landed where love needed him most. The cafeteria hung in stunned silence as if time itself had paused to breathe. Conversations had died mid-sentence. Utensils hovered above plates forgotten. Even the buzzing fluorescent lights seemed to dim under the weight of revelation. Daniel Reed, the quiet janitor with worn boots and gentle eyes, had spoken two words that shattered the room. Lone Eagle. The name echoed through the minds of sailors and SEALs alike. A ghost from whispered legends. Suddenly, flesh and blood standing in front of them with a napkin in hand and peanut butter on his daughter's sandwich. Emma blinked at her father, small chest rising and falling quickly as pride bloomed inside her, bright and fierce. She didn't fully understand the magnitude of what he just revealed. Not yet, but she sensed it. Kids always did. She squeezed his arm, voice soft and trembling with awe. Daddy, you're the Lone Eagle. Daniel didn't answer her right away. Instead, he reached for her juice box, poked the straw in with practiced care, and slid it toward her as if nothing in the world had shifted. His movements remained slow, calm, unrushed, the ritual of a parent shielding a child's world from storms outside. Yes, he finally murmured, tone gentler than a whisper, but steadier than steel. A long time ago, a subtle tremor rippled through the room. A few SEALs exchanged glances, not mocking this time, but shocked, reverent. They'd grown up hearing pieces of the tale. A classified rescue mission deep behind enemy lines, a lost team, a single operator who refused to leave his brothers to die. Stories told in low voices embellished by rumor, yet anchored in something terrifyingly real. Elena Carter stood near the doorway, breath held, posture rigid. Her mind raced through files, briefings. Hushed conversations among admirals who rarely got unnerved stories of an operator so brilliant, so lethal, so fiercely loyal, he became myth. And then he vanished from the military like mist dispersing at dawn. Now she understood why he moved like a man who had nothing to prove, because he didn't. Across the table, Admiral Grant Marshall stared as if he'd swallowed fire. His smirk had evaporated. Confusion, disbelief, and humiliation churned together behind his eyes. "Ridiculous," he barked, but the crack in his voice betrayed him. "He's a janitor." He never finished. One of the SEAL instructors, a man built like granite with eyes hardened by years of combat and loss, stepped forward. Colonel Hayes, decorated, respected. He saluted Daniel. Not a polite salute, a soldier-to-legend salute. Sir Hayes said, voice low-measured, reverend. "Is it true?" Daniel looked up, gaze steady but tired. As though answering might require reopening rooms in his soul he'd long since closed. "Yes," he replied simply. A collective exhale swept the cafeteria, disbelief melting into awe. Awe into silence. Hayes swallowed visibly. "It's an honor, sir." Emma sat straighter, tiny chest swelling with pride. Daniel brushed a crumb off her cheek, his smile quiet. "Private just for her. Eat your lunch, sweetheart." His gentleness contrasted sharply with the power his name carried. A man once capable of leading covert teams into fire, now cutting apple slices for a child. And in that contrast lay the truth of him. Marshall face Reening tried again, clinging to authority slipping through his fingers. "This is absurd. Why would a man like that mop floors? Why would Daniel finally looked up fully, calm, unbroken? The kind of stare men learn in places where lives depend on stillness. Because my daughter needed a father more than the Navy needed another weapon," he said quietly. A hush fell deeper. A sentence soft as prayer, heavy as duty. Emma watched him, wide-eyed fingers curling around his sleeve. "And I needed him too," she whispered almost defiantly. Daniel placed his hand over hers. Simple, profound. Elena felt something twist in her chest. Respect, something warmer she didn't want to name yet. Marshall, desperate, scoffed. "So you gave up being a warrior to wipe floors?" Daniel tilted his head slightly. "I didn't give up anything. I chose peace." His words sliced sharper than any dagger, and floors can be cleaner than the souls in some offices. He added not unkindly but undeniably pointed. A few sailors coughed to cover smirks. Even Hayes hid a brief smile. Marshall's face drained of color. Rage flickered, but retreat followed. He sensed too late that he'd picked a fight with a storm while holding an umbrella made of paper pride. Emma took a bite of her sandwich, finally relaxing. "Daddy, can we have cookies?" After Daniel's hard edges softened again instantly. "Of course I promised, didn't I?" She nodded, satisfied, returning to her lunch. The room watched the exchange, the juxtaposition of myth and fatherhood steel and softness. A legend not roaring or threatening, but wiping crumbs off a child's lips. Hayes straightened. "Sir, if you ever need anything, my team stands ready." Daniel nodded once. "Thank you, son." That son hit like a blessing. Hayes blinked through tight, then saluted again before stepping back. Elena finally moved, approaching the table. She didn't rush, she didn't posture, but her voice held quiet gravity when she spoke. "Mr. Reed." Daniel met her gaze unflinching, respectful. "Admiral." For a beat, the two regarded each other warrior and warrior, though only one wore the uniform now. "You didn't have to answer him," she said softly. "No," Daniel replied. "But sometimes the truth is quiet until pride forces it to speak." Elena exhaled through her nose, not a sigh of annoyance but of awe. Her eyes softened as they drifted to Emma. "Your daughter is lucky." Daniel's gaze lowered to his child. "I'm the lucky one." Elena pressed her lips together, steadying something unsteady inside her, then she lifted her chin. "Enjoy your lunch, Mr. Reed." "Thank you, Admiral." She walked away slow, thoughtful, leaving behind a cafeteria that no longer breathed the same air it had before. Daniel returned to peeling orange slices, hands steady. Emma hummed a song only children know, wordless, light, fearless. Outside, flags flapped against the San Diego wind as if saluting without command. Inside, men and women stared at the quiet janitor with something approaching reverence. Not because he had power, but because he had given it up. Word traveled through the base faster than orders down a command line. In training rooms, whispers crawled under the clamor of clanking weights. In offices, keyboards slowed as glances drifted toward the cafeteria doors. Even in the far-off hangars where jet fumes hung thick in the air, someone paused mid-maintenance and murmured the name like myth returning to flesh. Lone Eagle. For years, he was a rumor, a ghost story exchanged between deployments, a name recruits heard only if they listened closely enough. A man who led impossible rescues, who walked into war with precision reserved for the rarest kind of warrior, a man who disappeared not out of failure but by choice. Now that legend was mopping the east hallway outside administrative offices, his daughter drawing smiling dolphins on scrap paper at his feet. Daniel wrung out his mop, the faint scent of pine soap rising. Footsteps approached a slow rhythm, not hurried. Respectful, a group of SEALs stood nearby, uncertain whether to address him. They weren't used to not knowing protocol. You didn't salute a janitor, but how do you behave in front of a living myth? At last, one stepped forward, a younger operator with cropped hair and nerves written across his jaw. "Sir," he said quietly. Daniel looked up, brow raised in gentle amusement. "Son, I haven't worn a uniform in years." "Daniel is just fine," the operator swallowed. "Yes, Daniel," he hesitated, then added, If anyone disrespected you earlier, we didn't know." Daniel dipped the mop again. "You shouldn't respect a person because of who they were," he replied. "You respect them or you don't because of who they are." The young man exhaled as if a weight had lifted. He nodded once firmly, then stepped aside. The others followed, a quiet salute hidden in the tilt of their shoulders. Not military formality, but human reverence. Emma held up her drawing proudly. "Daddy, look! This dolphin is smiling because she has a family." Daniel knelt, studying it like it was rare art. "She must feel safe," he murmured. "Just like I do when I'm with you." She beamed sunshine wrapped in freckles and innocence. A few yards away, Admiral Grant Marshall stood stiffly, shoulders tight. The humiliation clung to him like wet wool. He watched Daniel with a storm brewing behind his eyes, anger, confusion, and a fear he didn't want to admit. If the legends were true, then Daniel Reed had walked paths Grant could never tread, not even with all the stars on his collar. And worse, Daniel had chosen to leave power behind. A man who doesn't need rank is dangerous to those who worship it. Marshall turned away, but not before Daniel noticed. He didn't call out. He didn't smirk. He simply returned to his work. Power never needs to announce itself. A shadow fell across the hallway. And suddenly, Elena Carter stood there, coffee in hand, posture composed, but eyes more open than before. Her voice was soft, stripped of rank's armor. "May I join you for a moment?" Daniel leaned on the mop handle. "This hallway is all yours, Admiral. I meant to talk." He gave a small nod, then motioned to the empty bench near the window. Emma followed, hopping up and swinging her legs, humming to herself. Elena sat smoothing her uniform. For a moment, she said nothing. Silence felt safer than the storm of questions inside her. "You didn't deny it," she finally said. "Not when he mocked you." Daniel's expression didn't change. "No, why now?" There was curiosity there, but beneath it something deeper, something like admiration. Daniel looked at his daughter, then back at Elena. "Truth doesn't need to be shouted," he said. "But sometimes it needs to be spoken to protect what matters." Elena followed his gaze to Emma. Understanding arrived quietly. "You walked away from the Navy," she murmured. "To raise her, not walked," he corrected softly. "Ran. The world asks men to be unbreakable, but she needed me to be human." Emma climbed into his lap without warning, resting her head against his chest. Daniel wrapped an arm around her like instinct protective tender. Elena watched chest tight with a feeling she hadn't expected. Warmth, yes, but also envy. The kind of ache that comes when strength masks loneliness. "We lost a pilot 2 years ago," she whispered. "My husband combat mission. Classified." Daniel's grip on Emma tightened slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "I stayed." Elena continued, voice, steady but fragile. "Lead served. That's what the Navy needed." "And what did you need?" Daniel asked softly. She blinked, almost startled. No one ever asked her that. She didn't have an answer ready. "I didn't think about it," she admitted. Daniel nodded, not pitying, but understanding. "Duty has a way of convincing us we don't have hearts." Emma reached out and took Elena's hand, a small gesture. Pure and without agenda. Elena froze, surprised by the warmth of that tiny palm. "You can sit with us for lunch tomorrow, too," Emma said brightly. "Daddy makes the best sandwiches." Elena's lips curved the first real smile she'd shown all day. I'd like that. A moment passed, not awkward, but organic, like something budding quietly between three people who hadn't expected to find comfort in each other's company. Then a deep voice called from down the hall. Elena, briefing room, 5 minutes. She stood smoothing her jacket. Thank you, she said to Daniel. For what? For reminding me something the Navy sometimes forgets. Her gaze softened. Streth isn't loud. Daniel dipped his head in acknowledgement. As she walked away, Emma whispered, She's nice. She looks lonely, though. Daniel brushed a hand over her hair. Even strong people feel alone sometimes, Emma nodded sagely. Then maybe she needs a friend. Daniel's gentle smile returned. Maybe she does. Behind them, whispers continued swirling through the base, but now the tone had changed. It was no longer mockery. It was reverence, curiosity tinged with admiration. Some saluted as Daniel walked past. Clumsy, uncertain salutes, but sincere. He didn't correct them, didn't claim the honor. He simply pushed his mop bucket forward, Emma skipping beside him. A legend didn't rise today. He didn't need to. Sometimes the greatest act of strength isn't to fight, but to choose peace when the world expects war. And slowly, quietly, unmistakably, the Navy base began to see Daniel Reed not as a myth reborn, but as something rarer, a warrior who had survived greatness and chosen grace instead. Evening rolled over Coronado like a soft blue blanket. The ocean breeze carried salt and stories brushing against hangars and barracks alike. Lights along the sea wall flickered to life, a quiet string of beacons guiding tired sailors toward rest. School had ended, duty shifts closed, and the base felt for a fleeting hour human. Daniel walked toward the exit gate with Emma's small hand wrapped in his callous one. Her backpack bounced with each step, the tiny dolphin charm she'd tied to the zipper jingling with cheerful innocence. Daddy, she asked, skipping slightly, can we go see the ocean before dinner? Please, I want to show the waves my drawing. He glanced down at her eyes, bright cheeks flushed from the day. There was no version of life where he said no to joy like hers. Just for a bit, he said, squeezing her hand playfully, before your stomach starts making whale noises. My stomach does not do that, she declared, scandalized. Then after a beat, but it might soon. They reached the seawall waves pushing gently against the rocks. Emma scampered ahead, holding up her crayon-drawn dolphin proudly toward the horizon. Sea ocean, she called. I drew you a friend. Daniel leaned against the railing, letting the wind carry away the heaviness of the day. Not burden, but the weight of truth spoken aloud. Silence felt good. Peace felt earned. Footsteps approached, measured, confident, but softer than command. Elena Carter. Even in off-duty hours, she carried herself like an officer who didn't know how to shrink even around shadows of grief. But tonight she wasn't in dress whites or polished shoes. She wore a navy blouse and slacks, hair down for once, dark waves stirring in the breeze. She looked real, lighter somehow, though the world still rested subtly on her shoulders. Evening, Daniel, she said quietly. He nodded. Admiral. Elena, she corrected gently. Just Elena right now. He inclined his head, accepting that small offering of humanity. Emma spotted her and waved enthusiastically. Hi, Admiral lady. Elena smiled wide enough that it surprised her. Hello, Miss Emma. Did your dolphin make the ocean happy? Emma turned solemnly toward the waves. I think so. They're smiling in water language. Daniel chuckled under his breath. Elena's chest loosened, a feeling she wasn't used to in uniform or outside it. For a few moments, the three of them simply stood together watching the tide crawl in. No rank, no myth. Just people and the quiet ocean. You know, Elena said eventually, voice softer than surf. I spent years studying leadership, strategy, command, presence. She exhaled slowly. But today I learned something different. Daniel didn't ask, didn't press. He simply listened to skill men like him learned only after they survived. I watched a man carry power without needing to use it. She continued, and I realized, maybe the Navy didn't lose him. She paused. Maybe the world gained something else instead. Daniel's gaze followed Emma as she danced along the seawall edge. I didn't walk away from service, he said quietly. I just changed who I served. Elena swallowed emotion, catching unexpectedly. Your daughter is blessed, he shook his head gently. I'm the lucky one. She looked at him, then really looked at the quiet lines around his eyes carved by laughing with a child, not shouting orders. At the scars that didn't define him, but shaped how softly he now held life. at the steadiness that came not from pride, but purpose. You know, she murmured, some men die chasing glory, but you surrendered it for love. Daniel rested his forearms on the railing. Glory didn't tuck her in at night, he said. Didn't hold her when she cried for her mother. Didn't pack lunches or braid hair. A shadow passed across his face. Memory, grief, devotion intertwined so tightly they became something sacred. She needed a father, he continued. Not a flag, Elena nodded slowly. And yet somehow you honored both. Emma ran back breathless. Daddy, Admiral, Elena, can we get ice cream together? Like a team? Elena's eyes widened, caught off guard. Ice cream as a team. Emma nodded earnestly. Yeah, Daddy and me are Team Dolphin. You can be Team Eagle. Elena laughed. Real laughter. The kind that shakes loose dust gathering on the soul. I would be honored, she said. But maybe tomorrow. Emma accepted this solemnly. Okay, tomorrow's mission ice cream. Daniel gave her hair a gentle ruffle. Mission approved. Emma dashed ahead again, free as wind. Elena watched her, then whispered, She healed you. Daniel's jaw tightened, but not in pain. In truth, she reminded me that life wasn't meant to be survived. It was meant to be lived. They walked slowly toward the gate together. Emma skipping Daniel, steady, Elena, thoughtful. Every step felt like the world rearranging itself into something gentler. As they neared the parking area, a group of sailors spotted Daniel. They paused. Mid-con conversation straightened unconsciously not to salute, not officially, but out of instinctive respect. Then they whispered to each other, awe in their eyes, but made no move to disturb him. Elena noticed. Daniel ignored it. Does it bother you? She asked softly. The attention? No, he said. But I don't need it, she swallowed. Most men crave it. He glanced at her, a faint smile touching his lips. Most men haven't learned what matters yet. They reached the gate where the American flag whipped in the evening wind. Emma stopped, saluted with exaggerated seriousness, a salute full of childhood sincerity. Elena returned it instinctively. Daniel didn't salute the flag. He looked at it the way a man looks at an old friend with gratitude and distance. Before they parted, Elena hesitated just a fraction. Daniel, she said quietly, would you join me and Emma for dinner sometime? As friends, Daniel considered not fear, not reluctance, just thoughtfulness because he didn't let people close easily. Maybe, he said softly. If life allows, Emma interrupted, tugging his sleeve. Daddy, she's lonely. People who are lonely should eat with friends. That's a rule. Daniel's gaze softened at his daughter, then lifted to Elena. Life might allow, he murmured. A breeze swept between them, cool, gentle, full of possibility. Elena nodded once, not as an admiral, but as a woman finding light after loss. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Elena. Good night, Admiral, Lady Emma called. Elena laughed again, softer this time. Good night, Team Dolphin. They parted at the gate. 3 silhouettes in the fading blue, each walking toward a future they hadn't expected. And as the flag rippled overhead, quietly and proudly, the base seemed to breathe differently, knowing that somewhere among them walked a man who conquered battlefields, and chose instead to conquer loneliness one small hand at a time. The next afternoon arrived wrapped in soft sunlight and ocean breeze, the kind of San Diego day that made even hardened officers pause at the horizon. The base hummed with routine drills, tactical briefings and the distant thump of helicopter blades, cycling exercises over the water. Daniel wheeled his janitorial cart toward the courtyard, Emma skipping beside him as she hummed a tune of dolphins and brave sea otters. Today. She held a peanut butter sandwich in one hand and a paper napkin proudly scribbled with hearts in the other. Daddy, she said, swinging his arm to make him sway. If dolphins had backpacks, would they keep snacks in them? Like seaweed crackers? Daniel chuckled. Probably emergency sardines. Emma scrunched her nose. Ooh, you like sardines? They're good for you, he answered calmly. Warriors eat sardines. She tapped her chin in deep consideration. Then dolphins must be warriors, too. As she hopped ahead, Daniel shook his head slightly, a warm smile tugging at his lips. There was no battlefield he had ever walked, no enemy he had ever faced, fiercer or more unforgiving than the fear of failing that child. And there was no medal, not silver, not bronze, not gold, that equaled the honor of holding her hand. He'd faced death without blinking. But loving her was the bravest thing he'd ever done. They reached the picnic benches near the training field. Elena Carter was already there waiting, not in uniform today, and soft slate blue blouse hair and a loose ponytail. She didn't look like an Admiral Tonite. She looked like someone learning to breathe again. Emma squealed and ran to her. "Admiral lady, you came." Elena knelt, accepting the fierce hug. "I don't break promises." Daniel approached slower, nodding greeting. "Good afternoon." Elena's tone matched his steadiness. Afternoon. They sat not across from each other but side by side, watching Emma climb the base playground rock wall. She waved dramatically from the top. "I am Queen Dolphin Bow to me." Daniel cupped his hands around his mouth. "Your Majesty, may we eat our sandwiches in your kingdom?" Yume shouted, "But no crumbs on the royal grass." Daniel shook his head, amused. Elena's laugh slipped out light unexpected like a window opening. For a while they sat in companionable silence, the hum of jets overhead, the distant bark of orders, Emma's tiny voice negotiating with imaginary ocean creatures. Life pulsed around them, simple and gentle. Finally, Elena spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said last night." Daniel didn't pretend to misunderstand about choosing peace. "Yes." She ran her thumb along the edge of the picnic table. "Most men don't walk away from glory, not when it's within reach. Not when history is within arm's length." Daniel's gaze remained on Emma. "Glory is heavy," he murmured. "History is sharp. I carried both and they nearly cut me open." Elena studied him. She'd seen heroism, arrogance, quiet dignity, but this was something else entirely. A man carved by the weight of doing what others couldn't, and then choosing love over legacy. "You saved lives," she whispered. "People speak your name with reverence." Daniel took a slow breath. "I saved men because they were mine. Because loyalty is the only thing worth bleeding for." His voice softened further. "But when I got home, the one person who needed me most was gone. Emma's mother." The ache threaded every word. "She passed while I was deployed," he continued. "Unexpected, and I wasn't there." His jaw tightened. "I held soldiers' hands as they died. But I wasn't there to hold hers or to hold Emma when she cried for her mother, Elena's chest HD. Military life demanded sacrifice. But this was sacrifice sharpened to a blade." Daniel continued, voice steady but raw. "When command asked if I'd take another assignment, I realized something." What Elena whispered. "That serving a country can make you fail the people who are your world." Elena swallowed. "And so you chose your daughter." "I didn't choose," he said. "I returned to the only mission that still mattered." Emma marched over with a plastic crown she'd found somewhere. She placed it solemnly on her father's head. "You are King Dolphin now," she declared. "You must protect the Ocean Kingdom." Daniel bowed dramatically. "I shall defend it with honor." Emma handed a tiny seashell to Elena. "And you're the Ocean Queen." Elena blinked. The title tugged a smile from her. "I'll try to rule wisely." Emma nodded. "Good. Now I need to rescue my stuffed lobster from the evil grass monsters." And off she ran again. When she was out of earshot, Elena's voice softened. "You didn't give up being a hero, Daniel." "I did," he replied. "On purpose." Elena shook her head. "No, you became a different kind." She looked at him, eyes gentle, vulnerable. "Strength isn't just carrying a rifle. Sometimes it's carrying a child alone day after day when no one salutes you for it." Daniel blinked once, slowly. No pride flickered, just humility, quieter than ocean foam. Emma returned, arms full of imaginary loot. "Daddy, can Admiral Lady help us build a sandcastle tomorrow?" Daniel raised an eyebrow playfully at Elena. "That mission sounds dangerous," he murmured. Elena smiled real and warm. "I think I can survive it." Emma gasped. "Yay." The breeze lifted strands of Elena's hair, illuminated by the sinking sun. Daniel watched, not romantically, not yet, but with the recognition of someone witnessing someone else learning how to feel again. Emma sat beside Daniel, exhausted after her imaginary battles. She rested her head on his arm. "Daddy, yes, little warrior. You think Mommy can see us?" Daniel didn't look away from the horizon. "I know she can." Emma nodded sleepily. "Then she's proud, right?" "Very," Daniel whispered. Elena blinked suddenly, wiping the corner of her eye. She wasn't sure whether it was grief or admiration or something between, but her voice came out hushed. "You didn't abandon your duty," she murmured. "You redefined it." Daniel placed his hand gently over Emma's head. "A country can train a warrior," he said, "but only love can shape a father." Elena closed her eyes briefly, letting the truth settle like sand after a wave. This man hadn't fallen from greatness. He'd risen above it. The next morning, the base felt different. Respect carries a sound, Not loud like applause, but quiet like careful footsteps. Subtle nods, doors held open, voices softened with something close to reverence. And today, every hallway Daniel walked through whispered that sound. He pushed his cart slowly, mop handle balanced loosely in one hand. Emma walked beside him, lunchbox bouncing, humming some tune about dolphins and brave soldiers who carried peanut butter sandwiches into battle. But everywhere they went, heads turned. Young sailors straightened instinctively. Older veterans paused mid-con conversation. Even secretaries in crisp uniforms offered warm smiles instead of the usual distracted nods. Emma noticed first. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging his sleeve. "Why is everyone looking at us?" Daniel smiled softly. Sometimes people see what they should have seen earlier. She scrunched her nose, thinking that through, then shrugged and skipped ahead, as if life didn't need to be complicated, unless lunch money was involved. Near the flag courtyard, a formation of SEALs stood waiting their posture. Stiff expressions unreadable. Daniel slowed, confused at first, then saw who stood at the front. Admiral Elena Carter, uniform pressed, sharp ribbons, gleaming posture, crisp yet eyes soft when they found his. And beside her, looking far less comfortable in his crisp whites, stood Admiral Grant. Martial cheeks, tight jaw, clenched ego bruised into humility. A podium had been set up, a flag backdrop, a microphone. The signs were unmistakable, a formal recognition ceremony. Emma gasped. "Daddy, are they giving you a trophy? Please let it be shiny." Daniel placed a gentle hand on her head. "I think this is something else." Helena stepped toward them, voice steady but warm. "Mr. Reed, would you join us?" Daniel hesitated. Ceremonies were for heroes, but he had chosen to be a father, not a figure. His heart tugged toward Emma, toward their quiet little world. Elena saw the hesitation and added softer, "Not for the Navy. For us, for people whose paths you changed without ever asking for thanks." That landed. Not pride, recognition of meaning. Daniel exhaled slowly and followed her to the podium, Emma holding his hand proudly like she was escorting royalty. When they reached the stage, Elena stepped aside. "Before we begin," she announced, "Admiral Marshall has something he wishes to say." Marshall swallowed Adam's apple, bobbing. He looked like a man being forced to swallow humility, a flavor unfamiliar and uncomfortable. But then his eyes met Daniel's, and something in them shifted. Respect, born not of rank but realization. Mr. Reed Marshall said, voice steady but subdued, "I spoke out of arrogance, ignorance, and pride. 3 flaws unbecoming of a leader." He paused, the crowd held breath. "I mocked you without knowing the weight of your service or the weight of the life you chose after. For that, I offer my apology." His voice trembled just once enough to show sincerity. Daniel nodded. "I accept." Marshall extended his hand, not as an admiral to a subordinate, but as one man to another. Daniel took it, a simple handshake. Yet in that moment, walls crumbled, and character became visible where rank once stood. The SEAL formation shifted subtly, as if an invisible breath of approval rolled through them. Elena stepped to the podium again, her voice carried across the courtyard, firm as command, yet warm as dawn. "There are heroes we salute, and there are heroes we learn from." She glanced at Daniel. "Mr. Reed wore the uniform with honor. But what makes him extraordinary is not the missions he completed or the legends whispered about him. It is the life he chose when the missions ended." Eyes across the crowd softened. Some glistened. "He taught us that leadership is not the medals on your chest, but the choices in your heart. That true strength is not always found on the battlefield, but sometimes in the quiet hallways where no one watches except the one pair of eyes that matter most." Her gaze flicked to Emma. The little girl sat proudly in the front row, feet swinging, smile bright as the flag overhead. "And today we honor not the call sign of a warrior, but the love of a father." Applause rose, genuine, not ceremonial. Emma clapped hardest, yelling, "Go, Daddy!" Daniel stepped to the microphone. He didn't want a speech. Speeches belonged to men chasing legacy. He only chased moments like holding his daughter's hand at sunset. Still, he spoke. "I'm grateful," he began simply, not for the recognition, but for what it stands for. He paused. The wind carried his voice as if the ocean itself listened. "There are soldiers who fight battles many never see, but the hardest battles happen at home. Raising a child, healing from loss, learning how to live again." Emma looked up at him, eyes wide with pride and a tenderness reserved only for fathers who show up. "Truly show up. I'm not a legend," Daniel continued, I'm just a father, and America is blessed with many like me, men and women who served and then chose to serve differently. He turned to the crowd. You protect our country. Thank you. Today I am honored to belong to the ranks of those who protect their families with the same courage. Silence fell, not empty, but full, brimming. Then a voice broke through. Deep, strong, proud lone eagle. Another followed, then another. Soon the courtyard rumbled with the chant, not shouted like a battle cry, but spoken like a vow. Lone eagle. Lone eagle. Lone eagle. Daniel raised his hand, not high, not triumphant, just enough to acknowledge with humility, then shook his head lightly. I'm Daniel, he said softly, and I'm her dad. Emma ran into his arms, wrapping her small hands around his neck. Daniel lifted her easily, holding her with all the strength the Navy once forged into him now used for love, not war. The crowd didn't cheer louder after that. It quieted out of respect so deep it didn't need noise. Elena stepped beside him. You still command a room, she murmured. Daniel smiled faintly, eyes on Emma. I don't need to command one, he said. I just need to raise her right. Elena's eyes softened. Then the nation is in good hands. He met her gaze. Steady mutual recognition blossoming into something warmer. Not just the nation, he said. Just one little world. And that's enough. Evenings on base always felt different after ceremony days. The air carried a gentle reverence, as though the flag itself breathed slower, proud yet humbled by the humanity beneath it. But tonight felt different for another reason entirely. Tonight wasn't about medals or whispers or call signs. Tonight was about a dinner table, a home-cooked meal, and a world far from command halls. Daniel stood at the modest base housing doorstep, dressed simply clean. Shirt sleeves rolled, once hair tied back loosely. He held a homemade salad bowl under one arm, Emma's tiny hand in his other. Emma rocked on her toes, excitement bubbling. Daddy, do admirals eat dessert, or do they have to salute the cake first? Daniel chuckled. I think admirals eat like the rest of us, sweetheart. Good, she declared. Because I brought cookies, and cookies shouldn't be saluted. They should be eaten with love. He squeezed her hand gently. Wise policy. The door opened before they knocked. Admiral Elena Carter stood there, not in uniform, but in soft evening clothes, apron tied loosely hair down around her shoulders. Without the crisp edges of command, she looked lighter, human, beautiful in a quiet, enduring way. Welcome, she said, warmth in her voice that surprised even her. Emma darted forward with a cookie tin. Admiral Lady, I brought reinforcements. Elena laughed, bending to accept it. Thank goodness. I was worried the mashed potatoes might stage a rebellion. Daniel stepped inside. The home was warm, not fancy, but elegant in its simplicity. Family photos lined a shelf. Elena in uniform beside a man whose eyes carried courage and tenderness. Little girls from squadron visits. Medals in a shadow box. Loss lived here, but so did dignity. The dining table was set for 3. Candlelight flickered softly. A vase held 3 white roses. Emma gasped. It's like a princess dinner, Elena gestured to the table. Tonight we eat as friends, not ranks. Daniel nodded. I prefer that. They sat Emma bouncing in her chair, eyes scanning the dishes like a mission briefing. This meal smells amazing, Daniel said honestly. Elena exhaled in mock relief. Please let it taste that way. I can command fleets, but roasted chicken jury's out. Emma took the first bite, paused dramatically, then announced, It tastes like hugs. They laughed. Something in the sound felt healing. Conversation flowed not about battles or legends, but about school-favorite ice cream flavors, why dolphins would make excellent Navy officers. Because they're fast and cute, Emma argued. Elena listened, not like an admiral analyzing intel, but like a woman learning to enjoy laughter again. At one point, Emma leaned across to whisper loudly, My daddy is good at everything, but he's bad at folding laundry. Daniel lifted a brow. Mutiny in my own ranks, Emma grinned. Truth must be spoken, Daddy. Elena covered a smile behind her glass. You're a brave young lady. After dinner, Daniel insisted on helping with dishes. Sleeves rolled up, hands steady in soapy water. Elena dried plates beside him. The domestic rhythm felt startlingly natural. You do this often? She asked softly. Every night, he replied. It's part of raising a tiny general. Elena's smile faded into something softer. You make it look effortless. It's not, he admitted. But it's worth every second. Silence settled, not awkward, but meaningful. You know, Elena said quietly, I used to think purpose only existed in service, in medals, in rank. Her voice dropped. Then my husband died and I discovered purpose can feel like punishment. Daniel didn't speak. He waited. He let the truth breathe. I stayed in uniform because it hurt less than going home to a quiet house, she continued. Less than remembering he won't walk through the door again. Daniel placed another plate on the rack. Duty can become armor, she nodded. Yes, but armor gets heavy. Daniel looked at her, really looked. Maybe it's time to take some of it off now and then. Her eyes lifted to his steady, vulnerable. And if I don't know how Daniel wiped his hands on a towel, voice gentle, you start small. Dinner. Laughter letting someone carry a little weight with you. Her breath trembled, not from fear, but from release. Emma burst in suddenly, carrying a board game under her arm. Admiral Elena, Daddy, we have a mission. Candid land. Elena laughed, the tension dissolving like sugar in warm tea. A vital operation critical, Emma declared. Daniel shrugged. Orders are orders. They played not because duty demanded it, but because hearts did. Emma cheated twice. Elena pretended not to notice. Daniel pretended to be fooled. When Emma won spectacularly, she threw her arms in the air and shouted, "Victory for Team Dolphin!" Later, as Daniel helped Emma put on her sweater to leave, Elena walked them to the door. Emma hugged her tightly, then declared, "You're part of our team now." Elena froze, emotion rising. "Thank you, sweetheart." Daniel looked at her, quiet warmth in his eyes. "Thank you for dinner," he said. "Thank you for letting me feel." "Normal," she whispered. Daniel nodded gently. "You don't have to choose between strength and softness. You can be both." Her eyes glistened. "I'm learning." He smiled softly. "Good night, Elena. Good night, Daniel." "Good night, Admiral," Lady Emma called over her shoulder. Elena stood in the doorway long after they left, watching the two silhouettes in the dim walkway. Father and daughter, hand in hand under the soft halo of base lights. Two worlds, the uniform and the humble life walking side by side. And somewhere between them, her heart felt its first true exhale in years. No medals, no rank, just warmth and possibility. Saturday morning dawned warm and gold sunlight stretching gently across the ocean like a promise. The base gates gleamed under its touch, flags rustling softly in the calm coastal breeze. Families jogged together. Sailors carried duffel bags toward towers and classrooms. Life flowed as it always did, steady, proud American. Yet today, something felt different. Daniel hadn't planned anything. Saturdays were for library visits, pancakes shaped like animals, and slow walks along the pier, where Emma fed imaginary sea commanders with goldfish crackers. But as they walked toward the base entrance, like any ordinary weekend morning, the air felt charged, like memory itself was holding its breath. Emma held Daniel's hand and swung her lunch pack, chatting about how dolphins deserved tiny Navy medals for bravery. And maybe tiny goggles too, she added seriously. Salt water hurts their eyes. Daniel smiled softly. You're going to change the world someday. I already am, she said, lifting her chin proudly. Because I have the best, Daddy, a voice called from behind. Assembled, Daniel turned. The walkway ahead, normally quiet, was lined on both sides. Two perfect rows of sailors, Marines, aviators, officers, dress uniforms sharp as steel. Their boots glimmered, their stances straightened, their eyes lifted in unified reverence. They stood like guardians of honor, forming a path leading from the gates to the heart of the base. At the front stood Admiral Elena Carter Cap, tucked under her arm, hair loose in the wind. Her gaze found Daniel's steady, gentle, proud. Emma blinked, stunned. Daddy, did we win something? Daniel froze. He had walked through gunfire and night raids with less shock. He looked around, not with pride, but with a deep humility that softened even the air around him. Silence fell respectful, reverent. Then, as one, every service member lifted their hand to a salute. Not for Lone Eagle, the myth, for Daniel Reed, the man, Emma gasped softly. Daddy, they're saluting you! He swallowed the weight of love and recognition, pressing gently against scars that had long stopped bleeding, yet never fully healed. A chief petty officer stepped forward. Sir, he said quietly, some men serve a nation by leading warriors, and some serve a nation by raising one. Another voice, a young SEAL, spoke up. Thank you for showing us what honor looks like outside the uniform. A Marine captain added, You remind us there's more than one battlefield and more than one kind of hero. Emma squeezed his hand, eyes shining. Daddy, you're glowing. Daniel exhaled slowly, emotion tightening in his chest, not pain, but something brighter, belonging. He looked at Elena. She stepped toward him slowly. One measured step, then another, until she stood just before him. Her voice was soft, but it carried the power of truth that outranks ceremony. A soldier protects his country. She looked at Emma and then back at Daniel. A father protects its future. Daniel held her gaze. I didn't expect this. No hero ever does, she whispered. Emma tugged Elena's sleeve. Admiral Lady Elena knelt so their eyes were level. Yes, sweetheart. Emma pointed at the long walkway. Are we allowed to walk through the middle? Elena's eyes softened. This walkway? It's for you both. The little girl's breath caught the enormity of the moment settling in her innocent heart, like starlight finding still water. Then Daddy should go first. Daniel shook his head. We walked together. She nodded fiercely, taking his hand. Together forever. And so they stepped forward. As they walked, service members saluted not just the warrior, but the father, the man who chose love over legend. Some eyes wet with emotion, some smiling with pride, some whispering his story to new ears, passing on the lesson that greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it holds a child's hand. Halfway down the path, Emma suddenly stopped. Wait, everyone froze, stunned. Emma released Daniel's hand and marched to Elena, grabbed her fingers and pulled her toward them. You come too, she ordered gently. Heroes don't walk alone. Elena looked startled, then deeply moved. She joined their hands, completing a small circle in a sea of uniforms. They walked the final stretch together. Father, daughter, woman, finding renewed hope step by step toward sunlight, toward life beyond sacrifice, toward quiet happiness earned through battles seen and unseen. When they reached the end, one sailor voice thick began a soft clap. Another joined, then another. Soon applause rose, gentle, respectful, like waves lifting and falling on a calm shore. Not a roar of celebration, a sigh of gratitude. Daniel bowed his head. Thank you, he murmured, for honoring not who I was, but who I chose to be. Elena leaned close, her voice barely above the breeze. Heroes retire, fathers never do. Emma squeezed both their hands triumphantly. And now we get ice cream. Laughter rippled through the ranks. Daniel smiled, full and honest, the kind he hadn't worn in years. Ice cream sounds like a mission we can all agree on. Elena brushed her fingers lightly against his. A silent promise. Not rushed, not dramatic, just real and patient. Let's go, she whispered. As they walked away from the formation, hand in hand, heart to heart, the American flag whipped high above them, catching sunlight like hope. A lone eagle soared across the sky, wings outstretched, gliding into open horizon. Not fighting, not fleeing, just free. And Daniel, once a shadow, once a legend, now simply a father walking toward a future full of gentle mornings, lifted his daughter up, kissed her forehead, and stepped into the next chapter of life. Not alone, not forgotten. Honored by quiet love, steady purpose, and the freedom only peace can bring. Nen and El Toy, thank you for sharing this quiet, meaningful journey with us. Before you go, I would love to know where in the world are you watching from today. Your presence here matters. Your story matters. So feel free to drop a comment and say hello. I always enjoy seeing where our little community is tuning in from. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of strength, kindness, and the power of family, please consider subscribing to our channel. It's the best way to stay with us on the next healing, inspiring chapter. Thank you truly for spending your time here. Take good care of yourself. Keep kindness close.